You ever find yourself taking notes on books, like copious amounts, because while the information doesn't necessarily apply to you right now, you don't want to lose track of any of it because it's all valuable, like all the insights you gain from reading it. Like you go online, you search for second brains, like you go Obsidian or Good Notes, and you look at how do I do this the best, how do I summarize the best, how do I index this the best, how do I store these notes. They all seem to try to solve this issue of people read books that don't necessarily apply to their life and the current issues, and they get dopamine from all of these insights that they have about the book, yet they don't have any way of applying them or any urgency to apply those to their life or their current predicament. So therefore they forget it, and they don't like forgetting it because they just learned all this stuff. So they obsess about ways of taking notes on it, ways of storing it, yet never actually look back on those notes because it's kind of like this FOMO. I stopped doing this a couple months ago, but for at least a 2-year period, I would like take copious notes on my books and then like highlight them, and then I pull those highlights into a document in which I could then search them and like kind of look up the summary. And I'm thinking about this, I'm like, I am literally just trying to hoard knowledge. Like I read a book, and I'm not saying it's bad to read books that aren't about current issues that you have, like Today and Tomorrow by Henry Ford or My Life and Work. Great, amazing books. Have really interesting ways about thinking of the world. And I mean, I don't really have any current uses for them, but the thing I realized is I don't need to have a current use for those books, but I also don't need to impulsively store the information in note systems. I can just understand a general idea of what that book is, put it on, this is just one of my bookshelves, put it on a bookshelf, and then if I have an issue in the future, I can just go back and look through it. Another thing that I've realized is, we have ChatGPT, and you can ask it questions about said book. While not perfect, it can do a lot better than most note-taking applications that you would have, because you're not going to capture everything within a note. And this method is really only used if I want to search through to make sure and certain ideas talked about in that book, because I might have an issue I want to go back to my reference of books about, and I'm like, it could be in this one or this one, so I'll use ChatGPT, I'll find out which book it is. You don't even need to actually give it a PDF. You can just ask it which book it talks about it in. And one thing I've really used is ChatGPT for book recommendations, because that's useful. But once you have the book, you actually just go back, go through it, read it again, because you don't realize really what information in that book is going to stand out and be the most beneficial for you till you read it. It's like, I don't know, you'd have 10 different people read a book, and those 10 people are going to have very different highlighted sections about what is applicable to their life and what they value and what they want to try to implement. So I've stopped taking copious notes. I still go through my books. I have like little sticky binder tabs, like things you put on the edge to mark pages, but I just take them, stick them on certain paragraphs in the book that I find very interesting. So with this current system, it's a lot easier. It's like a just-in-time approach. So you have an issue, you look for a book about that issue, you read that book about the issue, and then you make the changes it talks about in the book. There's no need to really store the information because you can't store it that well. Like, you really can't capture the essence of a book in a one-page summary guide. Like, you just won't capture the nuance that will allow you to implement it. It's the reason why you bought the book and didn't just go like look for a one-page Yahoo response or Reddit thread talking about the issue. It's because you wanted the whole thing, not just the quick summary guide of it. Let's see. Okay, even when you do take notes on the book, I think people fall into this phenomenon of taking notes on books that don't necessarily apply to their life because you get a dopamine release when you come across or have a new insight. So you wind up chasing these dopamine releases by reading books that don't necessarily apply to your current situations or would necessarily benefit you, So you try to store this knowledge, but what winds up happening is you just keep reading more and more books and you never actually wind up implementing any of it. What I find a lot more effective for me personally is to read a book, work on implementing 1 or 2 ideas from that book, and then go see what other problems I have, find another book, read that book, implement some things. And it's like read it, reflect, implement it, read it, reflect, implement it. One thing I will do is I will highlight or I will take notes on actionable steps the book says or recommends for me to do. And I'll do the exercises the book says to do. If it's a Wim Hof book, I'll do the breathing work that it recommends for me to do. I'll do the meditation styles it recommends for me to do. With Buy Back Your Time, I'll break down my week into 15-minute intervals and I'll highlight and reflect back on all the things I did. Because that's also part of implementing the book. Like, you have an issue, you look at your issue, you implement it. One of the ideas I also had is, instead of necessarily focusing on storing the information, if you just improved your reading speed, then you could just take the book off the shelf and read it and then put it back. Even your skimming speed. Because for me personally, I read books slow. My brother can read a full 200-page book under an hour easy. If I can get my reading speed up to near his level, where a book that would take me 5 to 6 hours to read, that he can do in 1 hour, then it doesn't even matter about note-taking anymore. I could just reread the book. The only reason why I was taking notes in the first place was to try to remember the information, because it took me so long to read the book. But if I can just pull a book off a shelf and read it in an hour, I don't really give a crap about taking notes on it, because I'll just reread it and get the full context with all the information in the author's words. Yes, there is a space for taking notes on books. There is a way of doing it, but what I'm saying is you can take notes on books, you can annotate books, you can do it, but make sure you're doing it for books that apply to you. When you do it and you spend too much time doing it on books that are just in case information, that's when you start having issues, and that's when you start wasting your time chasing the dopamine and the insights that these books give you without ever implementing them. Like, look at any personal development book, any self-improvement book, any book on that topic that could be beneficial to your life. If you just implemented all the things the book talked about, or tried your best to implement all the things the book talked about, you would honestly be a lot farther along than if you read 10 more books that had 10 more approaches or 10 more insights into doing it. Taking the action is a lot more valuable than learning everything you can about a certain topic. And a lot of the things you learn, you actually fully understand through taking action. So a question to ask yourself is, what are the actionable steps you can take on this book right now in order to change your life? Take those steps, put the plan into action,